What is up? Today we're going to be covering the last normal variant. That one is eyesight, which is described here. This one's kind of interesting, and we'll just go and get into it real quick. The way it works basically is each clue indicates the number of non-mines you can see in all four orthogonal directions. So you can see here, for instance, this 4 clue, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 cells where like a mine kind of blocks its sight. These clues operate similarly to how cave clues now, if you've played that pencil puzzle. If not, then that will mean nothing to you, but yeah, we can go ahead and just kind of get into it. So first of all, the first thing we can kind of notice is there are some restrictions on the 7's length, like horizontally specifically. For instance, let's just kind of try and see how far I can extend it. We can get it this far, but if we extend it here, this is actually going to overload this 4, right? Because this 4 will not be able to see too many cells. So we know this is as far as it can possibly go horizontally. That tells us there must be at least an additional 3 vertically. So then that will tell us, regardless of whether we start by going down or upwards, it's going to have to hit these 2. So we can just go ahead and mark these. Something else we can kind of see is just, because we only have a total height, I guess, of 6, is that there must always at least be 1 cell going outwards for this 7, and at least 2 for this 8. So there we go. Something else that we're going to kind of notice here is that wherever we can actually further extend this one out, because the idea is that we know that all of these 3 share a vertical component, right? So that means the only differences, further numbers, can be accounted for in the horizontal component. What that tells us then is that this 7 needs to have at least 2 more horizontal than this 5, and this 8 needs to have at least 3. So there we go. And now this 4 clue is finished, so we can mark off all of those. What that will now tell us then is that this 8 clue will have exactly 5 cells vertically. We can just kind of get that because we have 3 here, and the remaining 5 must be a part of this. So first of all, we then know this one is also a mine because now there are 5 cells in this vertical area. And this one is also a mine. And then we also can see that one of them must be up there, just from the same kind of argument before we like go down and then up. We now know exactly that the 6 must have 1 cell there, just because it's still part of this 5 column. This 3 is also finished. Now we can kind of see from this 4, first of all, we know that it can only ever have 1 cell in this region of 2 at most. So then we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know that both of these up here must be non-mines. Now, we know this 4 can't go down because that will overload it, so we can then see it goes exactly there. This 2 is also finished. And lastly, now we can kind of consider what happens if this one here is a mine. Then both of these 4s must extend out here, but that overloads this 2. So we know this one must be a mine. Neither of these are mines. This one's also a non-mine. And now we've kind of reached a point where we know, since there's only 1 more cell in this column, that one of these 2 must be a mine, the other one must not be a mine. So we can mark the rest of these as non-mines, and there we go. That 3's finished, so is this 7. So that's kind of the way that eyesight is going to work. And we'll now go ahead and move on to some more challenging eyesight puzzles. So we can start with, I guess, this one right here. We can kind of see from the same trick as before, we know this 5 is going to have at least 1 more in this direction than the 4. So there we are. Now we can kind of consider what happens if this one here is a mine, for instance, right? We then know this must be a mine just by our height difference requirement, and for this 5 now, we know it must extend over here, but that will overload this 2. So we then know this is a non-mine, this one's also a non-mine, so there we kind of are. And now one thing I guess we can kind of consider next is if both of these are mines, then we can see this one must extend over here, like such, to finish off. This 5 must extend, can only go 1 more in that direction, but it's also all it needs to, so we can't get any more information out of these 2. And that's all that will give us. Alternatively, we can consider what happens if this one instead extends out 1 more square for each of these and then goes over. We can see this 4 is already finished. And so is this 5 right here, so is this 5 over here as well. So that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. And lastly, we can consider, well, actually we know for a fact it can't extend out any further. So these are kind of the 2 scenarios that we're running under. I'm not immediately seeing anything that's going to help determine which one of the 2 that we're actually kind of looking at just from that alone. One thing we can notice is that in the red case, this 6 can only go at most 3 horizontal, so that means it needs 4, 5, 6 going downwards, so we can see this one is always a non-mine. And there we go. Okay. One other thing we can kind of now see is that regardless of where this 3 is, we always know, first of all, this one down here is a mine, but that's just because, basically, this 3 is always a part of a group of 3 with one of these 2 clues, regardless of which of the 2 cases we look at. And since we know those are binary, rather, that they completely cover our possibility space, I guess, we know that these 2 will always be mines. And that finishes off this 2. This 3 is also finished, so there we go. We can go and mark off all of this stuff. What we now know is that I guess we know in the yellow case, this one here is a non-mine, but not a lot else currently. I guess one thing we can also notice is that the red case is no longer possible because the 6 can now only have 5 cells near it. So we know that the yellow case is actually correct. So there we go. That gives us all of that information right there. We also now know that the 6 can only have at most 2 in this vertical region, so then we need 3, 4, 5, 6 going all the way over there. We can go and mark these 3, and we now know that this 4 can no longer go upwards for its last mine because then it would have at least 5. So we can finish off that. This clue's now also done. And so now from here we can kind of notice that since all these 6s are in the same row and this one goes up 1, we know that these 2 must also have at least 1 more in their vertical component, so there we go. But now they've hit kind of a maximum, so we also know that this one cannot go any more vertically, so there we go. And we can see that this 3 must then go this direction or this direction. If it goes over here, it's going to be overloaded, so 3 is finished, 4 is done. And now we have 3 cells left, 3 mines left. We can go ahead and finish that off. Alright. And now that we have finished all the main variants, we can kind of go over here to our grid and just kind of, I guess if we want to, go down the line of some of our E variants. I'll specifically go for ones I haven't covered yet in my playtime. So here we go. This one is eyesight connected. If you don't recall connected, I don't know, go back watch that video. How about it? So the first thing we can kind of notice is that this 6, and well, maybe I'll mark it with this. This 6 can go at most 4 in this direction. If it goes 5, then it'll hit 6, which is fine for it, but not for this 5. So we know it must have at least 2 more in this direction. And so now we can see this 3 is finished, then that finishes off both of those. And also, interesting enough, finishes off the 5, since it can no longer go that direction, and this 6 is also done. So there we go. Okay. One thing we can consider is this 2 can only go 2 horizontally, so it needs to go 3, 4 vertically. There we go. Now we can, I guess, consider what happens if this one here is a mine. Then we know neither of these are mines. This one here must be a mine for the 2, so then we can connect this mine up to the rest of them by going through there. And we can now see that the remaining cell for this 5 must go right here, so that gives us this is a mine, and this one here is a non-mine. There we go. Okay, and this doesn't necessarily run into any problems. So now we can consider what happens, I guess, if this one is is a non-mine. Then we know that okay, maybe not actually a lot. Maybe it would be better to think about this 3. What happens if it goes down, first of all? Then we know this must go right, like that. Right, and we also know that this 5 can't connect up over here, so there must be a mine here. Okay. Because if it connects up over there, then while the 5's fine, that means that the 4 would need to have 3 going off, because it can only have 2, or rather, it must have 2 going horizontally, because we only have 2 vertically, and that's not allowed. So, okay, we can actually consider that, yeah, in this case, we know the 5 must then extend this way, which is interesting. I guess then we still kind of have 2 cases here where either it's both of these vertically or just one over here, in which case pushes it over there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I guess in either case we could see that this one up here must always be a non-mine for this scenario. And I guess one last thing we can kind of consider is if this one is a mine, what happens? Then we have mines in both of these places. We also now know this must be the case. Yep. Okay, there we go. We have run into a problem. So in order to kind of finish up this 5, we actually need to overload it, because it already has 3, but then needs to go 4, 5, oops, it hits 6. So we then know that this one up here must be a non-mine. Okay, there we are. And now we can notice if we make this one a non-mine right here, we can kind of get some more information going. Not sure if it gives us a lot, though. I guess we can consider it. So then we know it must go up here, which tells us these ones go over here. This one then must be a mine. So there we are. Okay. So that's one case, and then this mine must just, or this group must extend over there. The other case, where this one is a mine, we can mark that one as a non-mine, mark this one up here as a mine. Okay, something we can see is that this 2 must always go upwards like that. There we go. That also finishes up this clue. So then I think we now know this 5 needs to extend 1 horizontally in this direction specifically. It can't go more, so that finishes up all of these clues here. There we go. This 3 is now done, and lastly we just need 1 more mine there, and we have finished up the puzzle. Okay, not too bad. Next we'll move on to eyesight triple, or triplet. Okay, so I guess the first thing we can kind of notice is that at most this 7 can go 4 horizontally, which tells us it needs to have at least 3 vertically, so minimum it will go down here. Now the next thing we can kind of notice is that since there is a 5 up here in this column, the 7 must have 2 more in the row, not in the 5, so 1, 2, you can see it now connects up with the 4, but then that tells us, well, actually it doesn't tell us a lot that we didn't already know. Something we can now, I guess, consider is what happens if this one here is a mine, then this 5 must go up 1, right? Yeah. Which, I guess, isn't too surprising. Yeah, maybe it would be better to think about maybe this 5, I guess? Well, because, okay, one thing we can notice is if there is a mine down here, then we know this 5 must at least go up this far, right? If it doesn't, then it needs to have some more horizontal, but we can notice the 7 can only have 1 more horizontal. We also know that it will have 1 more horizontal, so this 4 is also finished. And then that tells us that this 5 must have exactly 1 going upwards from it. That isn't a lot of information there, so okay. Yeah, we don't know that for sure yet. Now, but say we assume there is a mine there, then we kind of run into a similar style of situation. Except in this case, we do have some more information about the 5, and where just the 4 has to go as well, interestingly enough. So there we go, we get all of this information. And I guess the last possible cases are, first of all, there are mines in neither of these positions. Then we can see we have 4 here. We don't actually know for sure, though, if it's going to be 4 or 5. Going for this 5 here. Vertically, so that's a little bit unfortunate. Okay. So I guess the next thing to maybe consider is if some mines around the 4 are non-mines. So like if this one, for instance, is a non-mine, then we get all of these mines. We get this one up here as a non-mine, this one down here is a non-mine, and we also know that this 5 is going to not extend at all, so we get all of this information as well. Okay. And then we know, since there's 3 here, this one needs to extend up 1 more, so I guess it's up to 5, and then we also know that this 7 is going to have to go 4, so there we go, and we also know it must hit 1 up here. Okay. I think that's all we can glean from this. Next, we're going to consider if this one here is the non-mine for the last part of the 4. So then we get all this information right here. Okay. I don't know if it really gives us a lot more on its own. It doesn't look like it particularly does, which is unfortunate, but what are you going to do? Okay, next thing we can consider is if this one up here is a non-mine, then we get all of these as mines. That one as well. Okay. So we then additionally know that this 5 cannot extend in either direction. So that tells us that this 5 must go up twice again. Neither of these can be mines either. And then lastly, this 5 must extend in both of these directions. So there we go. And this one over here is also not a mine. Our last case is if this one here is a non-mine, then first of all we know all 3 of these are mines, so that gives us some information, like, for instance, all of these cells must also be non-mines. And okay, we've actually run into a problem with this, where the 5 needs to extend exactly 1 cell, but both of these are non-mines, so no matter where it goes, it'll extend 2. Therefore, this one is always a mine. What that also means now is that first of all, we don't actually need to consider the purple case anymore. It's only now the red, yellow, and blue cases that are left for us. So there we go. We can just get rid of all evidence of the purple being around. And okay. So now that this is kind of what our what our case breakdown is going to look like. I guess we can kind of look and see if there are any patterns or suspicious areas. Like, for instance, I guess we can consider what happens if this one up here is a mine. So we'll just go ahead and look into this real quick. If this one is a mine, then we... First of all, we know from our case breakdown that this 4 must extend out one more, so it can have mines up here and down there, and a mine over there as well. So then we can kind of see this one down here must also be a mine. Or a non-mine, rather, which tells us this one over here is a mine. Okay. That's good to know. And so, I guess then the other case we should kind of think about is if this one still does extend over there, and this one down here instead is a mine. Then we kind of get this structure like that. But then we know this one must go over here. Right? Yes. Okay. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that breaks anything itself, which is a little tragic, but not a lot you can really do about that. I guess one other thing we can kind of consider is if some of these mines around here are, or rather, some of the cells around the 7 are mines from here, right? So first of all, then from this, we know there must be exactly 4 there, and then the remaining 3 over here. So that kind of gives us that all of this information, right? But now we've run into a problem where if this one is a mine, then this 5 must actually be a 6. So this one up here is a non-mine. And there we go. That's another piece of intel for us. So I guess now we can kind of consider what happens if this one up here, for instance, is a mine. Then we know that this 6 must have at least one non-mine, so it must go over there. That also tells us this 4 now is finished. Or rather, that this is the total horizontal amount it'll go. So we know this 5 extends down 2, but that breaks this 5 right here. So we know this one up here must be a non-mine. Yep, there we go. Okay. And so now that we can consider what happens if this one here is a non-mine, right? Because then we know that this 5 is finished like such, but you can see we've run into triplet problems around this 4. So we also know that this one down here must be a mine. There we go. Alright, now then, if this one over here is a non-mine, then we know this one over here must also be a non-mine, so we get all of this information right here. You can kind of just see if this runs into any problems. I figure this thing might not, honestly. This one doesn't feel as certain as some of the other ones when I kind of thought about them. Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's okay. What if, I guess, we go back to looking at some of the cases for the 4, now that we have this 6 and some additional information, right? So first of all, this gives us all of this information. Whoops, given that there is a non-mine there, except, actually, there being a non-mine here now breaks things, because this 6 should only have 1 non-mine by the 7, but it has 2. So we know this one up here is also a mine. There we go. Okay. Now let's consider what happens if the non-mine, I guess, is down here for this 4. Then we get all of this information, which unfortunately breaks the 5. So we know that this 4 also cannot extend down there. It must extend outwards. There we go. This 2 is finished, and by triplet logic, we can get rid of all of these. That 2 is also finished, and this 5 is already done, but also triplet logic gives us that. This 5 is finished. This 5 can't extend down here because it needs to extend at least 1 out, so we know this one is a mine, and this 5 is just finished then. So is this 4, so is this 6. Now from triple logic we can get that as a non-mine, and then we have finished the puzzle. We only have 4 mines left, 4 spaces left. There we go. Okay. And I guess now we can just go ahead and lastly do an eyesight snake puzzle. Here we go. Okay. So we can see first of all this 6 can only extend at most 4 this direction, so it needs to go 2 down. There we go. Okay. And now let's consider what happens if it does extend out 4. Then we actually run into a problem where this 4 can't have any more, but this 6 still needs to extend out that far, right? So we know that actually it can't connect up with this 4, so that means this 6 can only really extend 2. So that means we get 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. We also now know that this 4, well, it can still extend 4 like that. Okay. So what this is now telling us, though, is we basically have two possibilities. Either all of these are filled in like such, which gives us this information just from snake logic, or this one right here is not a mine, this one is, but then this tells us all of these are mines. This group here is not, neither of these are mines either. And okay, so now we can kind of check parity because we have two endpoints up there and down here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The parity does work out. Right? Yeah. Okay. So that is interesting. Whereas in the other case, it doesn't completely matter. Okay. Well, that is unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that might be actually a pretty good way to break through this. One thing that I guess we can consider, though, is in the red case, we actually... Never mind, no, the red case cannot happen, because here's the issue we run into. It can't go up here without getting stuck and creating a third endpoint, so then we know this one is not filled in. Similarly, we can see that one's not filled in, but that overloads the 4. So we then know that that is the case, and all of these are as such. We can go and mark both of these in as non-mines. This 6 must extend one more out than the 5, so it goes there at least. There we are. And, okay. Whoops. Oh, I did not look at that. Pretend I did not see that, because I did not. I was so sad, I, clicked it and it was lagging, and I hoped that I had not clicked it. Oh well, that was the hint function. If you're curious, it uses the same way that error detects, but instead of detecting an error, it will just tell you, what the next thing... It tells you the next logical deduction you can make, basically. Whatever, we're going to pretend we did not see that. I legitimately didn't. But yeah, trust me, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so first we can look at the cases for this 5. Either these both are filled in like such, in which case this 4 needs to at least extend out here. We also know these can't both be an endpoint, so that must be one. That kind of tells us it goes here. This 5 needs to at least go down one more, so we get this. And, okay. We actually also know that this 5 must go down another one. It needs to then loop around here, so 6 must have its last one up there, and this 4 then must finish like this. Is this the right number of cells? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It is not. Okay. So then what that tells us is that these must both be non-mines. There we go. Okay. And now, I guess the other thing we can kind of consider is what happens if this one here is a mine, maybe. Okay. Alright, first of all, we know that this 6 actually can't extend out here, because if it does, then there still needs to be a mine up here, or else this 4 will be a 5. But that mine can no longer be a part of the snake. So we know that both of these, and thus this one, and also that, are all non-mines. Or all mines, rather. So that tells us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 must extend down there. There we go. And we also now actually know the snake must at least extend out here. If it doesn't, then neither of these are mines, and the 4 is once again overloaded. So there we are. We also now know it can't actually go into these 2 cells. If it does, it gets trapped. So we can fill in both of those. And now we can continue kind of going through it. Well, the one thing we can see is we know that one of these 2 cells will be filled in, and that at least these 3, or some other similar combination need to be filled in. But that gets us a remaining 4, so that means this snake can't go down here, for instance. So we can mark all of these off. I think actually now we can finish off the 5, right? Yeah, because if it extends down here, it'll be 6, which is too much. So we know it's exactly like that. That finishes off the 4 as well. And lastly, we know that must be a mine there as well to finish off the snake, and there we go, we have completed the puzzle. And I think that'll be a good place to stop it for today's video. See you guys next time with, I guess, hashtag, I think. Okay, bye-bye.